This episode of The Young Turks brought to you by Squarespace.
Go to squarespace.com/TYT and get a 2-week trial for free.
We've been talking about Private Bradley Manning for a while now. Before he was even charged, he was being kept in maximum security in isolation. Now, you can call it isolation, you can call it solitary confinement. Apparently, the Pentagon does not like those terms like solitary confinement. So they're going to bring on a man in a very nice suit. And people in nice suits wouldn't lie to you. So he's on MSNBC here with Chuck Todd and Savannah Guthrie. His name is Geoff Morrell. He's the main spokesperson for Defense Secretary Robert Gates. I think Gates has done a good job overall. I think Morrell's done a decent job. But it's his job here to come and try to pretend that Manning has not been terrible conditions and conditions that human rights critics say are psychological torture. Now listen to him deny it and then basically admit it. Let's go to clip number 6.
Bradley Manning, who is in military custody. He just had a slew of new charges against him yesterday. Many people have raised the question of the conditions of his confinement, whether they're too draconian, whether it's appropriate. You yourself have visited him and seen the conditions of confinement. How do you justify what the military is doing with regard to his confinement?
Yeah, I don't know about many people, but certainly some on the far left, a couple websites in particular, and I guess one of the shows on this network has also made an issue of it, saying that he's being held in solitary confinement. He's being harshly treated differently than the other detainees down there. I wanted to see for myself. I went down with the department's general counsel. I came away impressed about how professionally the brig is run down at Quantico. There are only 30 cells in the brig down there. It's a relatively small facility. Every one of those cells is identical. So the cell that Private Manning is being held in, even though he's a maximum security detainee there, one of 2, is identical to the medium security detainees, the 7 others that are there.
Is it solitary confinement?
It's not solitary in the sense there's 30 people on a U-shaped, corridor. So he's not in a hole. He's not away from others. He's allowed to have conversations with others on that corridor. The only difference really in how he's being treated than others is outside of his cell. He does not take his meals in the chow hall, but nor do any other maximum security detainees. He doesn't exercise out in the prison yard, but nor do the others. He is allowed to exercise outside in a confined space. Alone. He's allowed to go to the gym if he prefers. He doesn't watch TV in the TV room. He watches in his cell. They roll a TV in front of his cell. He takes his meals in his cell. So he's not being treated differently than any other maximum security detainee.
All right. So he's except for the fact that he can't eat his meals with anybody else, as he just told you. He can't exercise with anybody else, as he just told you. Okay? And he has to be in his cell, which he didn't tell you, 23 hours of the day. The 1 hour that he gets for exercise, again, he has to be alone. Now, Morrell's excuse is, what? What do you mean? He's on a floor with other human beings. Maybe, even though he's not allowed outside of his own cell, and he's not allowed to see anybody else when he is outside of his cell, maybe he could yell to the other detainees that are on the floor. By the way, my guess is, if he tried to do that, there's no way they would let him do it, right? But Morrell says maybe they could have conversations through the brick walls and be like, hey, how are you? How you doing? Not true. So now, when you get to well, that sounds like solitary confinement, right? He says, he's not in a hole. Are we not merciful? He gets some degree of light. No, that's why people call that psychological torture. Because if you're not allowed to talk to anybody and you're not allowed to see anybody for the whole day, for day after day after day, you get driven crazy. That's why it is the harshest punishment, even for our maximum security detainees. And remember, for all of that time that he was being held, he wasn't even tried. Now, forget not tried, he wasn't even charged. They're taking a guy who's not even charged with a crime, and they hold him in those kind of conditions. Finally, he's now been charged with 22 counts, and including up to punishable by death, because they said he gave information to the enemy. Of course, he didn't. Even the accusation is that he gave the information to WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks is not the enemy. I know what they're saying, that eventually it gets to the enemy when it's in public. Now, I think that there is no reason in the world to keep him in those conditions. And, look, in the past, when the Pentagon papers were leaked, this didn't nowhere near happen to Daniel Ellsberg and there was public reaction saying, no, the government doesn't want its dirty laundry out, but the American people should know. We have a right to know. It's a democracy. Now, things have gotten so much more right-wing that we take a guy who's accused of that and not charged for months on end. We put him in the worst possible conditions. And then his other excuse is what? The size of his cell is the same as the size of other cells. And then go, oh, it's okay. And look, I'm in such a nice suit. If a nice, respectable man comes out and tells you on the TV cameras, oh, no, it's okay. I went down there and looked at it. It was just fine. Then it makes the psychological torture just a little less brutal, doesn't it? Can you tell? I'm not buying it. No, our treatment of Manning has been horrible. And, which program on MSNBC was saying that? I hope others were too, but I certainly was. So if he was referring to me, I'll double down on it. You're dead wrong, and you even admitted it in that program right there. By the way, there's one other comical element to this. He says they were keeping him on suicide watch after getting a lot of press on that, including by us. They changed that because it was so indefensible, and they actually removed the guy who had made that decision. So if it wasn't wrong, why did you remove the guy, right? But now look at Morrell trying to justify it by saying he was a threat to himself. Nonsense. Clip 7.
Held in the manner he's being held because of the seriousness of the charges he's facing, the potential length of sentence, the national security implications, and also the potential harm to him that he could do to himself or from others, frankly, who are being imprisoned there, if he were allowed to mix with the general population. So this is as much for his own good as it is because of the charges.
All right.
Oh, yeah, I know. The isolation and solitary confinement, it's for his own good. Is there any indication that he was suicidal in any way, shape, or form? The Pentagon has already admitted the answer to that is no. No indication, no evidence, nothing to justify it. And, we're just trying to protect him. Others might be so aggrieved by what he did. He's not a child molester. They're not going to do anything to him. Okay? The guy, there's no reason in the world why anybody would threaten him or do any harm to him. It's just an excuse so you can keep him in solitary confinement and then pretend that it's for his own good. So adding insult to injury. And by the way, why are they doing all this? If you haven't figured it out yet, it's because they want to put incredible pressure on Manning so that he'll say, oh, Assange made me do it. And he hasn't buckled. He hasn't given in because Assange didn't make him do it, as far as we can tell from the facts of the case so far. And Glenn Greenwald's written great articles about that, and you could read up on the evidence for yourself. Fire Dog Lake has written about it. And when you look at the evidence, it doesn't look like Assange made him do it. It's ridiculous. It's not just to make an example out of him. It's so they can say, come on, give us Assange, and maybe we'll let you see another human being. It's sick, man, and it's wrong. If you want to build a website or a blog, where do you go? You go to squarespace.com.
Squarespace just pushed a brand new social widget for geolocation services. Display your most recent check-ins from Foursquare, Gowalla, and Facebook Places on a live Google map. Go to squarespace.com/TYT and get a 2-week trial for free.